All right, today we are going to talk about differentiation. And differentiation really is your superpower. If you can differentiate for kids of all levels, you're going to see that they are just going to take off. So let's get started. First off, think about what does differentiation mean to you? For teachers, it means a lot of different things. We often think of it as something that we do after a test to reteach, or we think of it as something we do for remediation of kids. Maybe some of those myths will be dissolved when we get through this presentation. So think about what it means to you, and let's see if what your definition is matches up with what some of the expert academic definitions are. Think about how you differentiate in your classroom. Think of some examples that come to mind of what you use in your classroom. Think of some things you've seen in other classrooms as well. Maybe you'll get some new ideas when you see what differentiation can do in your content area. Now, all of this differentiation material ties right into the NICET rubric. It's element I.3. Teachers demonstrate knowledge of and are responsive to diverse learning needs, strengths, interests, and experiences of all students. Teacher planning varies or modifies instruction to meet diverse learning needs of each student using student strengths, interests, and experiences. The teacher plans for students to suggest ways in which instruction or lessons might be modified to advance their own learning, and teacher acknowledges the suggestions. So if you can do all those things, you would be a highly effective teacher according to the rubric. And you can see some of our definition is already starting to come to light. From the coaching tool or the walkthrough tool, you'll see some bulleted points with boldface here. So differentiation, what does it mean? Are you supporting all students? Are you deliberately checking for understanding? Are you adapting the lesson? Are you scaffolding instruction in tasks? Are you demonstrating that the kids can work independently without reducing the rigor of the standards? Are you pre-teaching, reteaching, or reinforcing important skills? Are you using small groups? Are you differentiating activities and using learning areas to provide targeted practice of previously taught skills and concepts? So if you're doing these things, you're doing a great job. If you're not, let's see some ways that we can do those. So what is differentiation? So Carol Ann Tomlinson from University of Virginia, she is widely recognized as one of the leaders in differentiation. Here is her definition. She says differentiation is factoring students' individual learning styles and levels of readiness before designing a lesson plan. Research on the effectiveness of differentiation shows this method benefits a wide range of students, from those with learning disabilities to those who are considered high ability. So, a couple things in there. First thing, of very high interest, I think. Learning styles we know and focusing on the individual, but she suggests that differentiation starts before designing a lesson plan. So it is not always a reaction to a test, and that's a good thing to remember. Secondly, that differentiation benefits a wide range of students, and that would include our accelerated kids. So we're not just always remediating when we do differentiation, we're also pushing our highest ability kids forward. So where do you start? So think about a kindergartner. This is how I like to think of differentiation, right? In the starting point, think of a kindergartner. What do they need to know to get to first grade? So if I was trying to pass kids on, I would want to know, what do they know and what can they do? And I would make a checklist. How many numbers do they know? How many sight words? Which sight words do they know? How many of their letters do they know? Can they write their name? All of those things that we know, right? When we send a kid on to first grade, we have a pretty good idea of those tasks that they can accomplish. So I think that when we look at differentiation in the upper school, in middle school, and high school, we've got to start with the standards, and then we look at the assessment data. So if you look at some standards like this one from Math Grade 8, Module 5, this is the overview. You'll see in the blue there are some pre-existing conditions, and in the black there are some new things that the kids have to learn. If I'm reading this introduction, and this is in all content areas, if you look at the modules for ELA, for math, if you look at the stuff for social studies, in science, there is an overview, right? So in order to be successful in Module 5, the kids already have to know some things that they learned in the last module. And then they need to know some things that they need to tick off. So if you're looking at your math kids in front of you or your ELA kids in front of you, and you say, well, Johnny's a 90 student and Mary's a 90 student. Well, are they the same student? Like, what does Johnny know? What does Mary know? What made up that 90? It's got to be tied back to the standards. If it's not tied back to the standards, then what is it based on? Like, it should be based on skills. It should be based on checking off these things. So I want you to just kind of get into that mindset as we move forward with differentiation. So we're going to try to make sure that the kids are up to speed and that they're ticking off all of the boxes that they need for the module that we're on right now. Now, the assessments that are going to show that can be multiple types of assessment, right? They should be real-time checks for understanding, right? As we teach, we should be making differentiation decisions. They could be web platforms like Lexia or MobiMax or IXL. So if I have algebra kids, I look at IXL and I can see what standards they know and what they don't know. I can see what IXL is doing for them. Lexia, I can see how they're doing in vocabulary or comprehension. I can see a breakdown of those skills. I could monitor my Infinite Campus gradebook, right? I could color code and put trend lines in there very easily. And I can see maybe there was a certain test that tested a particular standard that all of the kids are in red on, right? So I can monitor my gradebook. Making mastery-based formative assessments, so test quizzes, tickets out the door, right? Did they get that standard that I assessed? I could use rubrics, and I can do those in Schoology pretty easily. I could use portfolio. So if I'm looking at a kid's writing portfolio or a research portfolio or a science lab manual or something that would be portfolio-like, I could see how they've changed over time, and I could see some gaps that I might need to fill in. And then I could use formative assessments from old tests like old Regents exams or old 4 to 8 tests. I could put those in Castle Learning, or I could have those in eDoctrina. So I could use old assessments because the old assessments should be testing the kids on the standards. And so the kids should be able to do well on those old tests, right? So let's look at the cycle. It is definitely a cycle. The first thing is going to be in the upper left. I have to aggregate the data. I got to pull all my data points together. I've got to sort them out by criteria. So what kids for this particular skill or standard fall into different ranges? Who are my high achievers? Who are my satisfactory kids? Who are my just below satisfactory? Who are my really struggling kids? However you want to break those into ranges, you could do 1, 2, 3, 4. You could do it based on something that's curricular in your area. However you want to base those, sort them into ranges. Then analyze the data and look at individuals. Look at the trends that you might see. Maybe everybody did poorly on a particular question, right? So item analysis of questions is a useful tool. Look at your bubble kids. Who are the kids that are just below mastery? A lot of times you're going to find if you focus in on the bubble kids, you're going to get the most bang for your buck, because there are probably other factors that are not just classroom factors that are really affecting your lowest of the low kids. So look at the bubble kids and pay special attention to them, because you can make a lot of movement there. Then determine the reteaching. Determine what intervention you're going to use, and also determine what are you going to do to advance the kids who already have the skill. Prioritize your needs and objectives. Then create some action plans for individuals or groups. You might find that it's a whole group activity this day. Everybody missed it. Or everybody needs some advancement because they all got it, right? Create action plans either for individuals, small groups, or a whole group. And then implement your action plan and collect data to see if your action plan works, right? You've got to come back to it and see if it worked. So where do I start? Now that I know what each kid knows and doesn't know, where do I start? So what does differentiated instruction look like? It looks like I'm designing lessons that are based on kids' learning styles. We shouldn't only be focused on learning styles, but some kids have better modes of communication, right? So if a kid is a good oral presenter, and you're not really worried about their writing ability, and you are only accessing his knowledge and mastery through writing, maybe the kid's just a poor writer. What are you really trying to assess? So sometimes you have to keep their learning styles in mind. Like, if I need to assess this material, can I do it in multiple ways? And which one are the kids going to show their strengths, right? Group students by shared interest or topic or ability for assignments. So student choice is a huge power that you can leverage, right? If kids are doing things that are interesting with them and they can still show the writing or research skills that you need to show, then they're going to be more successful because they're going to have interest in doing the project. They're going to really be committed. You should be assessing their learning using formative instruction, which is instruction that changes our next step in teaching. You should be managing the classroom to create a safe and supportive environment. So sometimes DI looks like a change in environment, and we should be continually assessing and adjusting to meet kids' needs. So there are 4 different categories that it falls into: content, process, product, and learning environment. So content, some students in your class may be completely unfamiliar with the concepts in a lesson. Some might have partial mastery. Some may have already mastered this content. They already may be familiar even before the lesson begins. So we might have to differentiate content for those, what we teach. The second thing we could differentiate is the process. Each student has a preferred learning style, which we just said. And successful differentiation might mean delivering the material to those styles, right? They might be visual or auditory or kinesthetic learners. They might be readers. So we can change the way we teach. So we can teach what we teach, the content. We can change how we teach it. In the product, we can change how we assess it. We can change what is the final product that the kids are going to have to demonstrate mastery, right? It could be a test, it could be a project, a report, or some other activity. Maybe we give some differentiated product. In the learning environment, some kids might do better in a small environment, a large setting, alone. We can change some of those things. But today we're going to really focus on the first ones. How can we differentiate content, process, and product? So content. Here is a way we could differentiate content using Bloom's taxonomy, right? So the lowest readers in our group, the lowest learners in our group might just match vocabulary words to definitions. Still content that is standards-based. Some might read a passage and answer some questions. Some of them might think of a situation that happened to a character in the story and a different outcome. Some might differentiate fact from opinion in a story. Some might identify the author's position and provide evidence to support this viewpoint. Some might create a PowerPoint presentation summarizing the lesson. So you can see from knowledge all the way to synthesis that there are different activities you can have to still assess your standards, right? So what level of difficulty for the content are the kids at? For process, some kids might be best to get textbooks, right? If they're visual and word learners, they might be best to just get the textbook and access it from the text. Some kids might need some auditory support, so maybe they listen to the audiobook as long as they read. Some might want to do some sort of interactive assignment that might appeal to their kinesthetic learning style, right? So if I'm someone doing area, maybe I have the kids go out and rake leaves in a certain square footage, a certain area, and they can rake leaves to reinforce the volume or reinforce area or perimeter or one of a math or science type skill. Product. Some kids might read and write a book report. Visual learners might create a graphic organizer. Auditory learners might focus on their oral skills and give an oral report. And kinesthetic learners might build a diorama illustrating the story. So can the product still show that the kids are accessing the standards, but could their product be different? Could they have some choice even? The environment. Some you might want to break kids into small reading groups to discuss the assignment, right? They might do a Socratic circle or something like that. Some kids might want to work individually. Some might want to have a quiet space where there are no distractions. So how can you modify the environment for those kids and differentiate? So according to Kathy Perez, who is from Access Center, strategies that work effectively are these ones: tiered assignments, choice boards, compacting, interest centers and groups, flexible grouping, and learning contracts. So what do each of those things mean? Tiered assessments, or assignments, sorry, tiered assignments are designed to teach the same skill, but have the students create a different product to display their knowledge based on their comprehension skills. So, tiered assignments, working through blooms, right? They can have different products to show that they understand what we're trying to teach. Different levels, right? So again, differentiation is not only remediating our lowest kids, but it's pushing our highest kids to greater things. So maybe we're working in that synthesis blooms realm for our tiered assignments. Choice boards, right? Let the kids choose an activity that they would like to work on for a skill that the teacher chooses, right? So on the board, give them some options for different learning styles, kinesthetic, visual, auditory, tactile, whatever it might be. Give them some choices. You're going to see a lot if you create choice boards that you can use them over and over again for different activities. Compacting. So compacting is really important. Compacting helps kids get to the next level in learning when they've already mastered what's being taught. So if a kid is already shown by our assessment that their level of knowledge is already there, then we need to create a plan to move them ahead, right? So compacting creates a plan for what they need to learn. It excuses them from studying what they already know, and it creates free time for them to practice an accelerated skill. So if they're ready, how do we move them on? How do we compact the scope and sequence of the lesson unit and move them on? Interest centers are just where we would put kids to provide autonomy in student learning. Flexible grouping lets kids be grouped in a more fluid environment based on their activity or their topic. So we should have interest centers and flexible grouping. Learning contracts. So learning contract is going to be us sitting down with the kid and laying out what our expectations are for their skills. You have to prove to me you can do this. And showing them what the required components are for my lessons. But then the kid gets to put down some methods that they would like to use to complete that assignment, right? These contracts can allow students to use their preferred learning style, and they can work at an ideal pace for them, at their individual pace. And it encourages independent practice and planning skills on the kids' part. So as you look at that, these last couple slides are going to be for different content areas. So please flip through them and take a look at those areas and what we can achieve in each of those.